Welcome to The Table, a podcast where leaders pull up a chair and tell the real story, how they got there and how they stayed there. I'm your host, Jeanette Hernandez. So pull up a seat because this is The Table. Thank you, Dana, for joining us today at The Table. I'm so excited for you to be here. I know many people know you, but for those that don't, could you just give a little bit about your background?
Sure. And thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. So Dana Applegate, I have been in the insurance industry, 29 years, at the risk of dating myself, but I say that I was 5 when I
I was going to say,
started.
you were 12 when you
Yeah.
started.
So we're just going to go with that one. And so I started my career in personal lines. Actually, I was a field adjuster for homeowner and auto claims.
That's when it was a great job, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. I had a company
Best
car,
job on the planet. Full
it was,
cars.
um, and then eventually after several years of that, I will say, sorry to all the personal lines people, it got a little boring to me for a little bit. And I just wanted a bigger challenge and to kind of expand my career pathing. So somebody suggested commercial lines. And so then I went into commercial lines and, have pretty much spent the last 25 years in commercial lines, excess surplus mainly. And, usually on the claim side, most of my career is on the claim side, but I've done projects, I've done corporate projects for underwriting, restructuring, claims restructuring. I've done international assignments, I've done operations. So, I really have been very
Check
fortunate with
all the boxes. Yeah.
a lot of doing all the things in insurance and but I love claims. I'm a claims nerd through and through.
Did you have an aspiration when you started, said, my career path is I want to be C-suite? Did you have that in your line of sight?
I mean, I don't know that I said that specifically when I started because I didn't really know what insurance was.
None of us did.
I was actually working in politics at the time doing governmental affairs. And it was, the one of my clients who was the president of an insurance company that kind of pushed me into insurance. So I didn't really know, but I knew he was the president and I had a lot of respect for him. So I would say not specifically, but yes, in a way,
Yes.
it was I wanted to be a leader. I felt like
Mhm.
I was a natural leader my entire life. And especially with my siblings, I wasn't the oldest, but all my siblings would tell you I've always acted like I'm the oldest, and they've always acted like I'm the oldest. Um,
That's a
so
different table.
yeah, a different table, but that's just I just naturally gravitated towards that. So yes, I wanted to be like a very senior leader. I wanted to keep going. I still want to keep going.
So you had, I'll say you had the leader DNA, but would you say that that was kind of a pivotal point in your career where someone inspired you? You looked at it and said, I could do that. I think I would like to do that.
Yes, for sure. One of my former bosses, and he was, my mentor for many years. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, and a big loss to a lot of people, the industry, as well as me personally. But Alex was, my chief claims officer, the third insurance company that I worked for,
Mhm.
and just his style and his very kind of human approach, as opposed to being kind of more dictatorial, I guess
Yes,
I
a
would
dictator.
say.
Yes, yes.
I just was like, okay, I like this. I could do this. And, really wanting to source ideas from a lot of different places and not just hearing from leadership because I was not in a leadership role when he became my chief claims officer. But what
Um,
he did was have a meeting with everybody in the department. And I went in with like a 4-page list. And he was like, who is this
yes.
girl?
You had, this is my roadmap to your
Right.
job.
Yes.
Yes.
I was like, here are all the things we need to work on. And he was like, you think a lot, huh? And so I did have somebody that I was like, I aspired to be and still aspire to be, more like Alex, I would say.
You hit on a couple really interesting things. One, I wouldn't say it was a plan, but you just sat and identified and said, this is where I need work. That's where I want to get. And you're the person to help me. Was that the point of the list? Or was that just, I made a plan and this is my plan. I'm sharing it with you and you stuck to the plan?
So selfishly, I wanted to stand out,
Mhm.
right? And I was fairly new to the company. And I was coming in, a lot of people, the company that I left were saying, like, you're crazy for going to this company. They were going through massive changes. And, I kind of looked at it like a phoenix, right?
Some of
There's
the best opportunity
opportunities,
is there. Yes.
come out of mess.
Mhm.
So that didn't scare me. That actually excited me. And I have carried that through. Now that I think back on those things, that has always been something that has fueled me. I like to build, I like to change, I like to develop. but I wanted to stand out. And I wanted to stand out as a strong claims technical person,
Mhm.
which is what my role
Right.
was. But I also wanted to stand out as a future leader
Yes.
and somebody who was willing to put in the work and the discipline to help transform the organization. So that's where my list came from. And then it's also, I came from an organization that when I joined that company, it was smaller. So we didn't have as much infrastructure. We
Mhm.
were owned by a larger company, but it was a smaller location.
Right.
And I came from a company that was much bigger. I worked in the home office.
Mhm.
So,
Completely
right,
different.
completely different. So I was coming in saying, "Oh wow, we need this and we need that and we need this." And
They said,
so
"No,
that's
we really don't need all that."
right.
Yeah.
And that's, it was a conglomeration of a lot of different factors.
Mhm.
But, I would probably say I'm not afraid to admit that number one was selfishly, I wanted to stand out as somebody who thought a lot about the business, wanted to help the business grow, and wanted to be a part of the change.
I think that's a really interesting point because for a long time, there was a line to get to the table. So there you were told what you had to do,
Yeah.
but even if you did all of that, it's never guaranteed. You could have worked as hard as you absolutely want to, and someone else gets the seat for some other reason, and you
Yeah.
don't actually get to the table. So there had to be things along the way that you have tenacity clearly to start that early in your career. But how did you change the list? So as you hit different tables before you got to the C-suite table, how did you change the list going along to evolve? Did someone tell you? Did you have self-realization?
No, I am super curious. I ask a lot of questions.
Sign of a great leader.
It
Yep,
could be
always
annoying.
learning.
Some people some people find it to be annoying sometimes, but I really need to understand things. That's just that analytical side of me.
Mhm.
I also like to teach things. So, a lot of teachers in my family, I'm not one of them. I'm kind of the only corporate one, but I gravitate towards those things. So naturally, and I like to be hyper organized about things. I love lists. I love notes. I love writing. I think there's a lot of psychology
It's
behind actually
cathartic sometimes, yes.
writing things down
Right.
and retaining them and putting plans together. So just those things were natural to me. I mean, my daughter would tell you today, like when she's has a problem or a challenge, I'm like, let's write a list. It's always
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, let's write another list, mom. But so I naturally wanted to keep writing lists. And every time I noticed something, I would jot it down. And I would have many lists. I have them in my phone, in my notes, I have them in notebooks. And so it's just for me, yes, it was a constant exercise that I go through that I still go through today about things I want to work on, things that I would change, things that, I learned from my lessons learned. So yeah, so it's just I constantly evolved and I was always writing new lists.
I think that's a really interesting factor because we were in a meeting yesterday where we were talking about how often, because it's such a heavy job, right? If you're not actually doing your day job, you have to do market research to understand about your job. You have people to manage. It's always something. But do you feel like that writing also allowed you time to process? Because I talk to a lot of people and they say, as a leader, the number one thing is you have to set aside whether it's a couple hours on the weekend or put it on your actual calendar. But you're taking in so much information and sharing so much information that sometimes you get into this kind of
Mm,
mode. Do you
yes.
think that helped you in your career? The writing part and it's almost like
Yes.
journaling. I mean, you make
Yeah,
lists, but it's almost like journaling.
and it does. And anyone who was sitting next to me in some of the sessions today, I'm writing notes in my
Everything,
notebook, right?
copious notes. Yes.
I can't stop. And it is how I process information. It's also how I think about things and distilling down certain ideas into things that I want to apply and sometimes getting a twist on it, right?
Hmm.
Seeing something or hearing something the way that somebody is handling a situation, saying, ooh, I could apply that same concept to this. And so, I'm writing that in my notebook. So yes, I think it very much is a part of the way that I create
Hmm.
is through the writing of what I listen to. And I consider myself a very strong and keen observer.
Hmm.
And so that's why I like to write because I do want to remember some of those
Right. Yeah,
observations
we can't
because
remember everything.
we're
Yeah.
taking in a lot of information all the time and it helps me to look back and reflect.
What do you think once you got to the C-suite table was your biggest aha moment about? Because we're all surprised, right? I could say it's looking behind the curtain, whether it's the first time you speak at a board meeting but there's always a moment because you have mentors,
Mhm.
you're
Yeah.
learning as much as you can about it, but it's never what you expected when you actually get there. So what was your biggest aha moment about being at the C-suite table?
2 things I would say. The first is that not everybody is like me,
Mm.
and you know that, right? You know there's one of me.
But it
I
sounds like
mean,
a
most people
club,
are
right?
happy there's one
They're
of me.
all C-suite. They all
Right.
think the same.
What I mean by that is not everybody wants to continue to learn, develop, and grow and change for improvement.
Absolutely.
That was a surprise to me.
Absolutely.
And I was like, "Oh, okay. So some people are just yes people and they're just saying, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea." And I'm like, "That's not a great idea."
Yes.
So that was the first one. The second one for me is that you sometimes have a lot of cheerleaders
Mhm.
in your professional life, and sometimes when you surpass where they think you should be
Yes.
or where they are, you realize they're not your cheerleaders
Correct.
anymore,
Yes.
and
You
you're
lose a lot of the people that you
yeah.
kind of went up the ladder with. It
Yeah,
happens.
and they're they become defectors, and it's shocking. It really
Mhm.
is. It's shocking because you're like, "Oh, I thought we were kind of in this together."
Right.
And so those were probably my biggest aha moments, and I think it sounds when I say it out loud, it sounds a little naive,
Mm.
if you will, but I just thought I have a mentality that there's room for all of us.
Yes. Yes.
It's not a zero sum. Your success does not detract from my ability to
Mhm.
succeed. We can all do it together. And so when you encounter people that get to that level that don't feel that way,
Yes, and there's a lot of
it's
them. Yeah,
it's hard.
there's a
It's hard.
I
It's a hard
remember
reality.
getting promoted to vice president, and my boss at the time said, "You're going to have people that you've gone through your whole career with that absolutely will look at you with a different lens because now you're in the management club. So remember where you started." That was his advice. Remember your lens that you look at VP and C-suite with, because everybody, when
Yes.
you're starting out your career, like, do they even know what we do on the front line? But they also don't know what our job is and
Right.
all of the things. And sometimes we can't talk about everything, especially if you're publicly traded, or they don't realize there are all these factors of what we can share and can't share. But I think that's a really interesting perspective is pay attention around the table. So that's my next.
Okay.
We get to the table and there's always inevitably a couple of people, right? Some people get there and say, "Oh, I've hit my career. I can sit back now and everything, and I can coast." Others, great leaders, are always learning, always inquisitive, not to go to another level,
Mhm.
but to be the best that you could be at that specific moment. So when you have people that either, and sometimes people will want to push you out of the table as the new person, right?
Yeah.
There are tables when you have to wake up and say, this is either not good for me mentally, physically, for my family, for my career. The title's very attractive and all the things that come with it. But sometimes you have to say, I have to leave and find another place that's better for me. Or this just wasn't what I thought it was,
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
humble enough to back
Mhm.
up. Have you had an experience where you said, it's not the right table for me?
Yeah. A lot of times it's connected to leadership changes,
Mhm.
or sometimes ownership
Yes.
changes depending on
Yes.
what type of company you're in. And so and I think it's important to understand that your values are not always going to align
Mhm.
with others in every
Correct. And conflict is not bad if it's
no, if it's
healthy.
healthy,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
And I'm a big proponent of that,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I like conflict because I think it really drives big ideas.
Mhm.
Um, but it has to be respectful and there still has to be some level of alignment. And so when you start to recognize that either your values are
Mm.
now or your skills are devalued, what you are contributing is not valued the same way, or something else is completely, valued over and above that. I think you have to kind of take that hard look at, do I belong
Mm.
here?
Right.
And dare I say, are they worthy of me still being here?
That, yeah, there's one where you say, "Maybe I don't have the skills, I'm not ready for the table," but the other one is, "They may not see my value," and that doesn't diminish my value,
No.
it just means I'm at the wrong table where people can see it.
And I think you have to remind yourself sometimes that it's okay to be in that situation. It's okay not to fit everywhere and to have people either not appreciate your viewpoints or, not like your style. But you have to remind yourself that if this who you are
Mhm.
is what carried you through, the last 10, 20 plus years
Right.
and
You're
was
doing something right.
applauded
Yeah.
and valued by many,
Mhm.
and now it's not by a few, you have to remind yourself of that
Yes. Yes.
and to not get caught up in somebody else's, plan and to say, I have to have, that plan and I have to do what's right for me and what's healthy for
Hmm.
me. Which, look, I'm so glad we talked about those things today, health and wellness, because certainly when I was coming up in the industry around the same time as you, Jeanette,
Yes.
that was, you just worked yourself till you bled out, right? There was no such thing as health and wellness. It was,
Show up.
kill yourself for the job.
You follow the rules. If it's 40 weeks this week and 60 hours next week, if you want to sit at the table, that's what
That's what
there
you
was
do.
always, you had to pay your dues, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great point. I don't hear that as much anymore, that you have to pay your dues to get there. What you have to do is be smart. You have to be inquisitive. You have to be coachable,
Hmm.
and you have to be willing to show up in an authentic. I think authentic is a word I hear that I never heard early in my career. Be
A
authentic.
thousand percent.
It was like, "You're too nice, you're too sweet, you're too this, you have to be different, you have to have," and I think we all tried to act kind of a certain way of what we thought the role was supposed to be instead of what you're saying. Bring your authentic self, let people see your value, and that changes the dynamic on the table.
Yes.
But a lot of
Yes.
people are afraid to do that because
Still.
we're still human beings. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, you're a masterful technician to get to where you are, but you're also a great human being and you let people see that. Other people, like, if I show myself, what will they think? And I judge. And you have to almost, I talked to somebody about having thick skin, but you almost have to not care. You have to know, like,
Hmm.
you've talked about your journey with a lot of self-introspection along the way, which I think is phenomenal advice to people because if you don't have someone to check you, you better have self-check,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you get to that point, how are you able to maneuver all of that? It's you can have self-dialogues, but then you also have to have someone at the table, don't you think, that you can confide in, just
Yes.
like in any other part of your career?
Yes, you do, and sometimes it's in places you didn't know,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes you connect with somebody and it just becomes, that type of relationship, but you have to seek those out.
Yes.
And it's critical. We cannot do this alone. No one succeeds
Takes a
alone.
tribe,
I
yes.
swear. There's a lot of people out there that think they
They
succeed
think they
alone.
can, yes.
They do not,
Yes.
right? There's people behind the curtain, there's people under the table, right? There's people, above. And so you have to figure out where you can get that from.
Mhm.
And I think it should be multiple places. That's the other thing. It's not one
Do not
person,
want
right?
no,
It's not the partner you go home
'cause you
to
wear
or
so
the
many
best friend
hats.
or, your favorite colleague or
Mhm.
something. Yeah, you have to get it from different places.
What would you say is the one thing, if someone that was listening and on their journey to a table, what's the one quality or 2 qualities that you think would help them get there?
A little bit of grit.
Mhm.
And then I guess discipline. For me, it's the discipline, and discipline is pretty big because I think about that as focus.
Yes.
I think about that as intention,
Mhm.
and I think about that as follow through. And then the grit part is because so I'm speaking to all the women out there right now that we're still in 2025. We're still in a place where it's not equitable
Correct.
on many different levels, and
Correct.
but you have to have that grit.
Mhm.
Because if we are going to change and improve for generations to come as well as ourselves,
Right.
you got to have that.
You do.
It's not a thick skin because thick skin makes it seem like people can do whatever they want
Want
to
to.
you
Mhm.
and you just have to shrug it off, right? I view it more as now grit. Like, no, you know what? I can dig my heels in. I can be authentic and that's okay.
Yes.
And if you don't like that, then we are not a match.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay if we're not aligned as long as I think there's 2 things at the particular table you're at. There's one aligning with the organization. So you could sit at a table with 5 people you personally do not like at all, but if you're aligned from a career standpoint or a vision standpoint, you can still accomplish your job. You may
Yes.
not love your job, but it changes the whole dynamic of the table when you say, "Hey, I'm heard, I'm seen, my ideas." We have conversations all the time about inclusion and equity in it. And I think it's not just women, but certainly we still have a glass ceiling. You can speak, but you're not included. Like, they have to allow
Yes.
you to speak, but I mean, I'm sure you've had it happen. You say something, and it's a great idea, and it's crickets, and 5 seconds later, a gentleman next to you will repeat verbatim what you say, and they'll go, "Dan, that's the greatest thing ever. We love your idea." And you're going, "Really? Did anyone hear me?"
Oh, it
And
still happens.
that's the grit. Because thick skin, if you don't, like, I would go afterwards and say, "Dan, do you know you stole my idea? Because I'm telling you, you stole my idea, right?" And it's not about that because it really it's happened, but it's that if that was the greatest idea, I don't really care how it delivers at this point. But it is true. As a female leader, you do have to have your days where you say, "This is not right." And it's not right for anyone.
And I think, yes, I think there are ways to do it sometimes.
Mhm.
And I've done it privately, like you said,
Mhm.
after the meeting, going and saying, like, hey, uh, I would have appreciated if you just said, I really like Jeanette's idea and I'm going to double down
Exactly.
on that.
Right.
Right. And I think part of what I have learned is that you sometimes have to give the words to
Yes.
people.
Yes.
The other piece is I've also done it in some meetings where this has happened, and it has happened within this year,
Mhm.
where I said, you know what? Thanks. And I'm gonna make up a name.
Right.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
I appreciate the support of the idea that I just shared a couple minutes ago. I'm so glad you repeated it again. And I love that everybody in the room is supporting this. Let's do it together.
That's excellent.
And so, sometimes you have to do it that way,
Yes.
right? Again, and there's not always a clear answer of what works. Sometimes that falls apart. People don't like that you say that.
Right.
But I think you have to, be true to yourself. But I also think that every time we do it in private, and this is because I used to be like, okay, do it in private kind of thing. Every time we do it in private, we reinforce that it's okay to do it.
And publicly,
Mhm.
correct. Yes, I agree.
I worked for a leader at one point that was super, super supportive and encouraging and agreeable to everything that we sat down and talked about behind closed doors,
Mhm.
but did not execute that same kind of support always in public view. And so people didn't see it.
Right.
And then you sit there saying, wait, did I misinterpret all of this? And it wasn't. It was just, I started to learn from that and then started to say things like, oh, well, we just had this conversation yesterday.
Mhm.
You agreed that this was a good idea and starting to do it yourself in public. So I think you have to figure it out. But it also is okay, right? It's okay for us to have big ideas and for those big ideas to be heard. It's also okay for those big ideas not to get accepted.
Exactly.
But
Yes. And
we
it happens
shouldn't,
frequently.
right? But we
Mhm.
shouldn't feel like we have to shrink down.
Exactly. That's a really great way of saying it. 'Cause I think many people do. Many leaders, especially when you're new to a proverbial table, you think you have to fit in, and you kind of do.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
earn your spot,
Yes.
and that's in any. I don't care if you're a coach of a baseball team. You still have to learn your spot with the team. But I think so many people feel, oh, until I get to X point, I have to shrink, or I have to not use my
Hmm.
voice, or I have to fall in line. That's my least favorite statement, and I think that's a really important thing for people to hear, that it's okay to stand up for yourself. And when you're not heard, and it continues to happen, because you can, like you said, you can bring it up and people can continue to do that and have that bad behavior, and they may be supported by other people on your team. So then you say, this is not a healthy place for me,
Yeah.
or this is not good for my career. I need to leave. But I think so many people stay because you're like, "Oh, but I made it and I fought so hard." There could be a parallel table just at another company, or maybe what you thought that table was really isn't for you. And taking a step back, there's nothing wrong with it. Or taking a right or
Yeah.
a left, nothing wrong with it. Have you had a situation where you had to really look inside and say, "This is not a great place for me"?
Yeah. A
How'd you
couple of
how'd
times.
you handle
A
that?
couple of times. It's hard because you really have to start to be honest with yourself, and that can be very uncomfortable sometimes. My younger self would ask other people, like, where do you see me? And then I think, my older self really tries to write things down
Right.
and, journal, or if you will, and put some lists together about where do you see you? Where do
Mhm.
you want to be? Where is your passion? Where do you think you can make the most impact? Um, and and if when you're answering those questions, if where you are is not even close to how you answered those questions to yourself,
Right.
you have to make a move, right? I now it's more about modeling. What am I modeling?
That's an
What am I
interesting.
modeling for people on my team,
Mhm.
for my daughter, for other generations, right? For my nieces and my siblings, my friends, like what am I modeling? So I do try to think about that now because at this stage for many of us that's what is your legacy, right? What are you
It's not,
leaving
"I'm a great
behind?
technician." It's not what you
And
want people to
no,
remember.
and
"I
I'm
was a
just
good person and a great leader," and
and a solo champion. Like I don't that's not what I want, right? I want there to be long lasting, and a lot of those things happen without intention
mhm,
on at the moment, even though intentionally I'm trying to model, right? And so I had somebody who left and, the last company I was with and went on to a different opportunity. I didn't want them to go,
mhm,
I wanted to push them and to grow in other areas. they left, and still to this day, I mean, it's probably been 2 years, and they still, reach out constantly about, like, "I miss you," and
Yes.
every time I talk about you to my current colleagues, they're like, "Why did you leave her?" And I'm like, "Well, you needed growth too,
Right.
and this is part of your growth, so
Mhm.
don't look at it as you still have me,
Right.
right?
Yes.
We're,
We're just not together every day.
right.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know that, right? Sometimes people leave, or you leave, and you don't understand the impact that you have on them.
There is a ripple effect,
Yes.
right?
When people do share that with you, then it makes, for me, it amplifies my desire to model what I want the world to be like. And it's not to shrink down,
No.
and it's not to be devalued. And we
Correct.
could dislike people, but still respect people,
Correct.
right? You
Yes.
can dislike a decision, but still respect the vision or where it needs to go. And so I just think is that it's like, what are you modeling and what do you want people to believe? Because your teams and other people are looking up to you, whether you recognize it or not. And so, what do you want them to see and what do you want them to believe about what their possibilities are?
Yes. I think you had a really important point that people don't often think, particularly in the C-suite, is how much we internalize and personalize our jobs. It isn't just, I have to meet X number or I have to implement X process, particularly in a riff. I was chatting with someone else about it. I took it where those people can't, send their kids to soccer camp, and I thought about
Yeah.
each individual when we're going to roll something out, the disruption it's gonna cause, how painful it's gonna be on the people that report up through me, and I don't think they think we do that, so I think it's amazing, and I didn't hear people ever talk I didn't hear the personal side of leadership when I was growing up in my career.
Yeah.
So think the fact that, A, you're very honest about it, but you're talking about you're saying, "This is who I am as a leader, and it's okay to be a human being."
Yes.
Actually, that's what we need more of, because otherwise you look at it and you say, "Huh, I'm not sure I even want to sit with those people at the table," because you never see the human side, you only see the professional side
Yes.
24/7.
And I have a lot of people in, recent years say, "Oh, you need to show more of your softer side," is how it was described. And I'm like,
But did they ever say that to a male?
"No,
Going back to the
no."
female,
And
I've
yes.
had that said to me before. I'm like, "What do you want me to do? Like, bake cookies for like, what does that even mean?"
By the way, you also get judged by that,
Yeah.
right? If you start
Yes.
to show it
Too
softer side,
soft. Now you're too
you're
soft.
not
Toughen up a
serious
little bit.
enough,
Yes.
right? You're not,
Correct. Correct.
intentional enough about what you want to do. But it's not a softer side,
Right.
right? Am I a different person in the workplace than I am personally outside of the workplace? Of course.
Right. We
But I
all are.
also have different personas. I have like 10 different personas, right? I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. I'm a daughter. I'm a friend. I have all these different personas
Right.
that see different sides of me.
Mhm.
At work, I'm there to deliver results. It's not that I don't want to make friends. It's not an intentional, like, don't make friends.
Right.
It's more of, but I get paid
Correct.
to deliver results. And I
Correct.
take that very seriously.
Mhm.
And so, yes, maybe people don't always see what I look like outside of the
Right.
office, but then, but I try to bring that in by, sharing stories and
Mhm.
experiences and coaching and guiding and assuring them that failures are good as long as we learn from them and don't repeat them,
Right.
don't intentionally repeat them. That's why I kind of then started to look at it as the modeling aspect and what are you trying to model for people?
Mhm.
And it is being, that more authentic human focused leader. And so I consider myself, a human first leader
Yes.
because I want to recognize that sometimes people come to work and it is literally the worst day that they're having.
They're hanging on by a thread. Yeah.
And if I don't see that, and I know in the remote world sometimes it's harder to see, if I don't see and recognize that somebody looks different,
Mhm.
is acting different that day, and I go and kind of dump something on their desk or provide some critical feedback that they are not ready for,
Yes.
it collapses
Mhm. I agree.
because we are still humans.
Mhm.
And we talk about all the technology, but we're not robots. We're humans, and we have to treat each other like we're humans and not like we're numbers
Right.
and not like we're just people sitting at a desk. We have to treat each other like humans. And I think when you do that, then it changes. It
Yes.
changes. You can change somebody's day, you can change somebody's hour,
Career.
you can also change
Yes.
somebody's career.
Mhm.
Yes.
I think you're hitting on something that people don't realize is a big challenge with C-suite. And actually, it's the roadmap like you were talking. You probably did the whole ABPV people to get there.
Mhm.
But every level, you are removed more than the lower levels of dealing with people because you're stuck in these kind of C-suite meetings and board meetings and prepping for board meetings, and you don't have interaction as
Yeah.
much. And so when you pop in for 5 or 10 minutes to say hello to everybody, they only see a glimmer of you. They don't get to see the whole authentic you. And sometimes that's you coming out of a board meeting saying, "Hello, everybody. I just wanted to take a few moments." And like, "Oh, she popped in for 10 minutes." I think more leaders need to talk about that even though you may not see it all of the time, we think about it. We try to show up and be present as a human being,
Yeah.
but you're only getting a little sliver of my day. So putting it in perspective, because I think that I'm sure you heard from people, wow, it's so different, or you're exactly the same as you were when you were a director. And that speaks to you. That speaks to you being consistent and genuine as a human being, no matter what the role is or the table that you're sitting at. Do you have any advice for people that struggle with that? Because I think that's a really you can't overshare.
No.
There's
So,
a difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think my advice on that is things can be impromptu
Mhm.
and ad hoc. They don't have to be
Planned,
planned.
right.
It doesn't have to be like this, like, okay. I mean, we all know leaders. I know a lot of them that like 4 o'clock every day, they walk the
They
floor
walk the
and say hi
floor,
to
yeah.
everybody, right? That to me is not necessarily authentic.
Right.
It's more of like roll call.
Mhm.
um, and so what the advice is, and I have to give the credit to one of my former direct reports because when she would come into town and hold team meetings with her group, she would say to me, "Hey, between this time and this time, we're discussing X, Y, and Z. This is what's on our agenda. If you're in a meeting and it ends early, can you just pop in whenever into this conference room and just come and either listen or share a few things with the team?" And I said, "Sure." She started doing that. I mean, it was so amazing. More for me, I think. I mean, than them because I was hearing what they were talking
Right.
about,
Yeah.
connecting on
You're
that level.
included.
Yes,
Mhm.
sometimes they were trying to, solve for a problem, and then I would give, like a 30-second sound bite of, "Oh, well, this happened to me once," and they were just like, "That's it. That's how we should do this." And it was just so beautiful and unintentional,
Right.
and so then we just started doing that all the time, where then I would just pop into certain team meetings for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes. Sometimes the meeting ends early, sometimes the meeting
Right.
gets canceled
Right,
at the
right,
last
right.
minute. Instead of making it formal, like, "Hey, can you come in between 1 and 1:30 and talk to my group?" It was just I would just pop in if I had a few minutes here or a few minutes there, and it really that was so much more meaningful.
Mhm.
It also wasn't rehearsed, right? I
Right.
wasn't rehearsing
Right.
anything to deliver messages to them. I was, just engaged, and then for them, they weren't really nervous about it
Mhm.
because I was just kinda coming in, and I could be there for 2 minutes or I might be there for 20 minutes, and so it just I mean, that is my advice is don't force it,
Mhm.
take advantage of ad hoc,
The
unintentional
opportunities,
opportunities.
right. And I think so many of us either we're intimidated or we just don't know the ropes, and so we let those opportunities go, which could be pivotal in our careers because we don't know what those conversations are going to produce, right?
Yes.
It could just be
Yes.
getting to know another human being that you like. It could be somebody that sees something in you and helps elevate your career, but those opportunities are really critical.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of this I would share, which I think a lot of senior leaders don't do, anytime we were doing team meetings and people would have like a lunch and they'd be like, "Oh, you're welcome to stay for lunch." And I know like 9 out of 10 senior leaders are
Yeah.
like, "Thanks for the
Yeah,
offer.
exactly. I'm gonna catch a
I gotta
flight.
go." But I will tell you,
Mhm.
those conversations at the human level, whether it's about sports or kids or movies or shows, different hobbies, vacations, like even just staying for 20 minutes,
Right. Yeah.
10 minutes of those conversations and what you can
It
learn
means
about your
so
people
much.
and how you can connect with them on a
Mm.
different level and who you can use sports analogies
Yeah,
with and who you
exactly.
can't. Just things like
The
that,
connection.
right?
Right.
Um, Teenager drama and, helping each other through, just learning things like that. It's so helpful. And so I kind of always made a point of sticking around for at least some portion of the lunch when people are just relaxed
I think
and
that
not making it about work.
that's a great piece of advice for current leaders, right? Because we the viewpoint is, oh, leaders, oh, you're always so busy. I have so many people. You're always so busy. I don't want to bother. I'm like,
Mhm.
you're not. I'm right in front of you and I'm present with you. But they feel like they're taking up time because they
Yeah.
watch us go between meeting and
Yeah.
meeting and meeting. So I think not only do they appreciate that you did that, but I think they see, oh, there's still people. They just do have busy jobs, but she's taking time. That separates you from other leaders because you invested in them. It meant something to that person. How many people get to talk to C-suites? Not often.
Yeah, and listen, I'm investing in myself too.
Yes, yes.
I think that's the part that sometimes senior leaders don't see. And that's
Mhm.
when when I said before about sometimes people, they don't want to learn and grow, and that was
Right,
shocking to me. But this was also an investment. I'm not just here to be like, oh, look at me. I'm the big leader having lunch with the peons. That's
right,
not it at all.
right.
It's also like, how can I be better? What can I learn? What am I going to take away from this? Because sometimes in those casual conversations, they say, Dana, what would you do in this situation? I was on the phone with a vendor and this is what they said.
Mm,
How would you handle that?
right.
And then you're just giving like a quick bite of information. You're like, okay, cool.
Excellent.
And that's it. And
Yeah.
it's not
Doesn't
high
it doesn't yeah,
pressure.
right. It doesn't have to be this amazing epiphany that's, from Harvard.
No.
It's just great advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, any parting thoughts to people that are listening that are on the journey because it is a long journey. It is one I think grit also insinuates like you just can't give up. It's that little step every single day, even when you feel like you can't make. We had many days. I'm sure we woke up and like, what am I doing with my life? And then you brush it off, and then you keep going. So anything that you can give to the listeners.
Oh, so many
I
things, I think, right? I mean, it's
know.
so hard. I would say, find your tribe,
Yes.
in all areas of your life
Yes.
that can kind of help encourage you and motivate you when
Mhm.
you're having those moments of, oh, this is taking too long. I should have been there. I can't believe, John got that job and I
Right.
didn't get that job.
'Cause you have to talk about it.
You do
Right.
have to
Yeah.
talk about it, but then also try to learn from that, right? And just be like, okay, you think you're smarter than John. You
Hmm.
think you've been at the company longer than John. You feel like you deserve that job more than John. But is there still something you can learn from John?
Right.
Is there still
Right.
something in his style that you're like, oh, maybe I could adopt that?
Hmm.
Maybe you want to ask him, after he's in the job for a few weeks, how's it going?
Yep.
He's probably miserable because
Yeah.
we all, new jobs, new roles, you're drinking out of the fire hose,
Right.
right? So I just don't always look at maybe what I would call your enemies as enemies
Hmm.
because they might just be that great source of inspiration and motivation
Right.
to push you forward.
Or it's what you don't want to do,
Or it's what you don't want to do. I've
which
worked
is
for plenty of
it's an important
leaders
lesson. Right.
and
Right.
colleagues
Yep.
that do things that you're like, whoo.
That's not my leadership style.
And, I've had people that have worked for me in the past and stuff, and then, they work for somebody that's like they would consider a toxic leader.
Hmm.
And, and I say, listen, what you do is start taking notes of all the things that you don't want to do and the things you don't want to become. That's your lesson
As a
here. That's what
reminder,
you
yeah.
pull away from
Because you do
this.
forget it.
Yes.
And especially if you've had multiple, you could kind of get numb to it, and then you don't pick up the qualities, but you have to remind yourself, "Oh, that's not a great trait," because
Right.
sometimes they sneak in.
Right.
If you've worked for somebody that's a bad leader for years and years and years, you don't mean to emulate it, but sometimes it will come out.
And sometimes it comes out because you're rushing through something,
Correct,
right? And you
correct.
forget the why. You forget to
Mhm.
explain the why to somebody. But it's like there's always something to learn. Like for me, that's always what can I learn out of a situation, good or bad?
Correct, yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and joining us at the
Thank
table
you.
today, and I just wish you more success.
Thanks, Jeanette. This
Thanks,
was
Dana.
enjoyable.
Great. Thanks for listening to The Table. If you like this episode, please follow us and subscribe so that others can find us. Until next time, go out and find a seat at your table.